I'm so happy that you guys came out here tonight. One little bit of some housekeeping things, or two things actually. If you are sitting in the back little section, if you don't mind kind of sliding up here to the front part up here. Do what? Yes, Gregor, get him, Gregor. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Don't get him. And then the other thing too is if I was told to, if you guys have a face mask with you, if you don't mind putting that on just while you're in here, if you have it with you, that'd be great. I'm Jonathan Tyndall. I'm a college pastor here at Wesleyan College with Covenant Campus Ministry, and it's been my honor and my privilege just to have you guys come and to be a part of this event with Dr. Frank Turek, Cross-Examined. He's the author of I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, which we have books out front for sale that you can pick up afterwards. And it's so worth the read. I highly recommend it. And so with no further ado, I want to give the mic to Dr. Frank Turek. Everybody give him applause.
Thanks, Jonathan. Good evening, bishops. Is that all you got? Come on. Good evening, bishops and folks watching on YouTube. Let's go back to September 29th, 2006. That's when Petty Officer Michael Monsoor is a United States Navy SEAL operating in Ramadi, Iraq. Monsoor is on a roof in Ramadi, and he's standing in front of a doorway to this roof. He has two Navy SEAL teammates lying in the sniper-prone position next to him. They've already taken AK-47 fire and a rocket-propelled grenade, but they're not exactly sure where the enemy is. There's a bit of a lull in the fighting. Insurgents have blocked off the streets in Ramadi, and there's someone on the loudspeaker in the town mosque yelling, "Kill the Americans!" As Monsoor and his team are looking for the next attack, an insurgent from an unknown location throws a grenade up on the roof. It hits Monsoor in the chest, and it falls to his feet. Due to the length of the throw, there's no opportunity to pick it up and throw it back. He has only a split second to make a decision. He can leap through the doorway behind him and save himself, but if he does, his two colleagues lying on the roof will surely die. Monsoor yells, "Grenade!" But instead of jumping backward to save himself, he jumps forward chest first onto the grenade. It detonates. 30 minutes later, 25-year-old Michael Monsoor is dead. His two teammates receive only minor injuries because Monsoor's body muffled the blast. One of them said at Monsoor's funeral, "Mikey looked death in the face that day and said, 'You will not take my friends, I will go in their stead.'" I've never seen a United States president cry until April of 2008. That's when President George W. Bush invited Monsoor's parents to the East Room of the White House to give them their son's Medal of Honor posthumously. The president couldn't even get through the citation without breaking down. Since then, Monsoor's high school in Garden Grove, California, built a new stadium. They named it Michael A. Monsoor Memorial Stadium. The golden trident insignia that the SEALs wear dominates the 50-yard line. January 2019, North Island, California, just outside of San Diego, the United States Navy commissioned the USS Michael Monsoor, the newest guided missile destroyer in the fleet, 𝗬𝗏 class. This is Monsoor's mother, Sally, being escorted onto the ship, named in honor of her fallen son. Now, why did they do this? Because Michael Monsoor literally sacrificed himself to save his friends. There's no greater love than to sacrifice yourself to save your friends, said Jesus of Nazareth before he went to the cross. Michael Monsoor sacrificed himself to save his friends. The question is, would anyone sacrifice himself to save you? And the answer is, someone already has. His name is Jesus of Nazareth. But there are many people in our culture today that don't think the story's true. After all, it's got miracles in it. We don't believe in miracles anymore. And it's written down by religious people. We know religious people tend to embellish things. They make things up. So how could you believe in such a fantastic story? Well, I actually think it's easy to believe that Christianity is true. You only need to answer 4 questions in the affirmative. In other words, if you investigate these 4 questions, I think you'll realize that the answer to these 4 questions is yes. And if the answer to these 4 questions is yes, then Christianity is true. What are the 4 questions? Here are the 4 questions. Groovin' music, isn't it? Yeah. That is actually from our TV show on Wednesday nights on DirecTV channel 378. It's also on Roku. If you have Roku, just look for NRB. We're also on radio every Saturday mornings. The show is called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, but if you're a college student, I know you don't get up until the crack of noon on Saturday. So it's podcasted. You can listen to it anytime you want. And what we do is we present evidence for Christianity, and we cross-examine ideas against it based on our website right there, crossexamine.org. Now, why are these the 4 questions? Truth, God, miracles, and the New Testament. And this is going to serve as our outline here tonight. First question, does truth exist? Why is that important? Well, you hear people saying there's no truth, you got your truth, I got my truth, all truth is relative. If there's no truth, obviously Christianity can't be true. Of course, if there's no truth, then atheism can't be true either, right? Of course there's truth. We're going to deal with it. In fact, if there wasn't truth, why would you be at college? I mean, what are you here to learn? You're here to learn truth, right? So we're going to deal with that question first. Second question, does God exist? I hope to show you tonight that a theistic God really exists. What's a theistic God? That's a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, moral, personal, intelligent creator who created all things and sustains all things to this very moment. We're going to look at 3 arguments for this being. These arguments are in the Bible, but you don't need the Bible to know them. In fact, we're going to try and establish the existence of God without any reference to any religious writing or argument that comes from a religious book. Third question, are miracles possible? Obviously, Christianity can't be true unless miracles are possible, and a lot of people don't believe they're possible. But I hope to show you tonight that not only are miracles possible, but the greatest miracle in the Bible has already occurred, and even atheists are admitting the data for this miracle. Then we're going to get to the key question, is the New Testament true? The New Testament doesn't have a prayer if there's no truth, no God, or no miracles. But if truth exists, if God exists, if miracles are possible, then we're going to see if the evidence from the New Testament documents are reliable enough to let us know if one particular event from the ancient world took place. What would that event be? The resurrection, right? Because if Jesus rose from the dead, game over, Christianity's true. Of course, if Jesus didn't rise from the dead, game over, it's false. Now, some of you are going, well, how does that show that the Bible's the Word of God? Well, if Jesus really is God, as the New Testament documents claim he is, now that's a big if, but if he is, whatever God teaches is true. Jesus taught the entire Old Testament as a Word of God, and he promised the New Testament. Look, I just have a personal policy. If somebody rises from the dead, I just trust whatever the guy says. All right? So the resurrection here is the key. Now, we can't cover it in a lot of detail tonight, so if you want to go further, the book is available out that way, not this way, out that way in that lobby. And there's even a 12-part DVD series out there. There's a newer book out there called Stealing from God, Why Atheists Need God to Make Their Case. I've noticed that when atheists are arguing there is no God, they actually have to steal aspects of reality that would only exist if God existed in order to say he doesn't exist. In effect, they have to sit in God's lap to slap his face. Now, I want to point out that all the proceeds from the sale of the books and the DVDs will go to feed needy children. Mine. Okay? Just so you know. Actually, you don't even really need to buy a book if you just want the overview of the argument. All you need to do is text the word evidence, no quotes on it, just the word evidence to that number, 44222. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can do it as well. Text the word evidence to 44222, and I'm going to send you this entire PowerPoint presentation in a PDF format. It's actually more slides than I can show you, right? So if you text that word evidence to 44222, I'll send it to you, and I'll put that up at the very end as well. What we're going to do here is start right here at Does Truth Exist? We're going to go through these 4 questions, and then we're going to get to your questions. And you think we're going to do Q&A, but actually tonight I think we're going to do all Q, no A. All right? So everyone can ask a question, takes all the pressure off me. All right? All right, you guys ready to go? All right, let's start right here at Does Truth Exist? And whenever you start talking about truth, you always have to start with Jack Nicholson. Right? Because Tom Cruise had him on the witness stand, and he said to him, "Colonel, I want the truth." And Nicholson said, "Bishops." If he said it that way, the movie would have gone nowhere. You can't handle the truth. That's not how he said it. Here's how he said it.
I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
All right, let's try that again. I want the truth. You can't handle the truth. Now that felt better, didn't it? Didn't that feel better? Well, there's a lot of people that can't handle the truth. They're saying, you got your truth, I got my truth, all truth is relative. Well, if you don't get anything outside of what we talk about here tonight, this is certainly, in the next 5 minutes, going to be the most important thinking skill we're going to talk about. And it's so important that even if you're an atheist, a Christian, anywhere in between, you're going to find this valuable. Because it's a thinking skill that can help you avoid believing things that are false. Because this thinking skill will help you detect statements that are false. And to show you what a dimwit I was 33 years old, I already had a master's degree, and I didn't know what I'm about to show you now. And it's so simple. You're going to go, Frank, how could you have missed this? All right? Here's the thinking skill, and the easiest way of showing you the thinking skill is to demonstrate using it. Suppose someone were to come up to you and say, there is no truth. You should ask that person a question. What should the question be? Yeah, if somebody says there's no truth, you say, hey, is that true? Is it true that there's no truth? Because if it's true that there's no truth, the claim there is no truth can't be true, but it claims to be true. Did I say that right? Can everybody see that this is a self-defeating statement? What's a self-defeating statement? A self-defeating statement doesn't meet its own standard. It violates the law of non-contradiction. If I were to say I can't speak a word in English, what would you say? Yeah, you just use English to say it. Or if I were to say my parents had no kids that lived, you'd say, well, that's self-defeating. Or my brother is an only child. Or everything I say is a lie. Some of you will get that tomorrow. Or all generalizations are false. Some of you will never get that one, all right? These are known as self-defeating statements. And you can get real good at identifying self-defeating statements by doing one thing. What you do is you turn the claim on itself. Turn the claim on itself. This is the thinking skill you got to get good at using. Again, whether you're an atheist, Christian, anywhere in between. Because you don't want to believe things that are false, right? And so many things out there are false, and they're easily demonstrated as false if you have this thinking skill. Let's do a few more of these. Suppose someone comes up to you and says, all truth is relative. If you turn the claim on itself, what would you say back to the person? Yeah, is that relative? Is that a relative truth? No, that's an absolute truth right there, claiming all truth is relative. If someone says there are no absolutes, what are you going to say to them? Yeah, are you absolutely sure? Right? That's an absolute truth claim right there. Now, sometimes it's said, people don't come out very frequently and say there's no truth, They'll say it this way, or sometimes they'll say it this way. There isn't the truth, only my truth. You've probably heard that, right? I get to live my truth, you live your truth. There isn't the truth, there's just my truth and your truth. What would you say to somebody who says this? This is also self-defeating. What were you going to say? My truth says your truth isn't true. Yeah. Then you just have a war of opinions at that, right? Actually, if you say this, is that just your truth or the truth? Because if this is just your truth, it's just your opinion. Why should I believe it's really true? But if it's the truth, then the claim there isn't the truth is false. It defeats itself. You see in that? So sometimes it's said that way. You know, the real truth of this, I know it's going to sound a little weird, but there's no such thing as my truth. There's no such thing as your truth. There's just the truth. You say, wait a minute, Frank, there are things that are true of you that are not true of me. Yeah, okay, my name's Frank, your name's Bill or Julie or something, right? But it's still objectively true that my name's Frank and your name is Bill or Julie or whatever it is, right? It's still objectively true, even if the truth only applies to me. Remember, truth is what corresponds to its referent. Yeah, my name's Frank, your name's Bill or Julie or whatever. The referent is what tells you who the truth is about. And it's objectively true that my name is Frank and your name is something else. It's not a relative truth. It's objectively true. Sometimes it's said this way. It's true for you, but not for me. Somebody says that, what do you say to them? Turn the claim on itself. This is also self-defeating. It's just a little bit more subtle. If somebody says it's true for you, but not for me, say, is that true for everybody? Is true for you, but not for me, true for everybody? Because if true for you, but not for me, is true for everybody, then true for you, but not for me can't be true because it's true for everybody. Did I say that right? I know that can give you intellectual constipation if you think about it long enough, but that's because it's self-defeating. It's like saying I can't speak a word in English. Actually, there's a more fun way of dealing with this. If somebody says it's true for you, but not for me, say, sure, go try that with your bank teller. Yeah, go to your bank teller and say, I'd like $100,000 out of my account. The bank teller looks at your account and says, I'm sorry, you only have $6.14 in your account. You must be a college student, right? And if you want to get the money, what do you say back? Ha! That's true for you, but not for me. Give me the $100,000. Right? No, if it's true, there's only $6.14 in your account. That's true for all people at all times in all places when referring to you at that time. It's just true. Actually, I go to a lot of churches. I normally ask people, do you think Christianity's true? And most people will say yes, and then I'll ask them why. And they'll say, because I have faith. Is that a good answer? Does your faith change whether or not God exists or Jesus rose from the dead? No, your faith doesn't change a thing about those things. I mean, do you have to believe something to make it true? Do you have to believe in gravity to stay on the ground? Do people who don't believe in gravity float away? Hey, look, there's another one. Hey, if you believe, you'll come back. No, that's not the way it works. You say, well, why is the Bible always talking about faith? Because there's two kinds of faith. There's belief that, and then there's belief in. Belief that is getting evidence that God exists, that Jesus rose from the dead, that the Bible writers are telling the truth. But all the belief that in the world, and by the way, we call this apologetics. It doesn't mean you're saying you're sorry. It means you're giving evidence for what you believe. But all the belief that in the world won't get your moral transgressions forgiven. For that, you got to go from belief that to belief in. James, the half-brother of Jesus, who wrote that little book in the New Testament called, you guys are a sharp group tonight. He says even the demons believe that God exists, but they tremble. Do you know that demons know that God exists better than we do? Yeah, they believe that it's true, but they don't trust in him. There's a difference between belief that and belief in. In fact, we know this in relationships, don't we? When I first met my wife 36 years ago, I got evidence that she would be a good wife, but all the evidence in the world didn't make her my wife. I had to take a step of trust in her to ask her to be my wife. And in a momentary lapse of judgment, she said yes. That's the difference between belief that and belief in. Belief that is of the head. Belief in is not only of the head, but of the heart. In fact, John, an eyewitness of Jesus, wrote a biography of Jesus we call the Gospel of John. And in the 20th chapter, toward the end, he said, these things were written down so that you may believe Jesus is the Savior, and by trusting in him, you may have life in his name. There's a difference between belief that and belief in. And if you don't want to go from belief that to belief in, you don't have to. You have the free will to do whatever you want. God will not force you into heaven against your will. If you don't want him now, you're not going to want him in eternity. You're also, by the way, going to hear this. There's no truth in anything but science. How many have heard people say this? You've heard people say there's no truth in anything but science. If you turn the claim on itself, what would you say back to that person? What's that? Yeah, but isn't science true? Or you might say it this way, is that a scientific truth? Right? This is not a scientific truth. You can't go in the laboratory and prove that. That's a philosophical claim. And you can't do science without philosophy. Science is built on philosophy, which is right thinking about reality. Why am I saying that? Because all data needs to be gathered, all data needs to be interpreted. In fact, in the book, Stealing from God out there, we have a chapter on science. This is the title of the chapter. Science doesn't say anything. Scientists do. You ever notice why you're getting different scientific opinions about COVID? You understand why that's going on? Because all data needs to be gathered, all data needs to be interpreted, and that's done by who? It's not done by science, it's done by scientists. And sometimes scientists have different data, which causes them to come to different conclusions. Sometimes they have the same data, and they interpret the data differently. Sometimes they have a political bias or some other bias that causes them to interpret the data differently. And that's why you get different scientific opinions. So whenever you hear someone say, science says this, you need to say, time out, science doesn't say a word. It's scientists that say things. Let's look at their data and see if it's gathered rightly, see if it's good data, see if it's interpreted rightly before we say, here's how we ought to live. So science doesn't say a word. Scientists say things. And if you think about it, the most important things that you know about in life have nothing to do with science. Honey, do you love me? I don't know. Let's run an experiment. No. How about this? You're going to hear this too. You should doubt everything. Someone says this, you turn the claim on itself, what are you going to say back? Yeah, should I doubt that? Why are skeptics skeptical of everything but skepticism? You ever notice they don't doubt that? Now, how many people in here, whether you're an atheist, Christian, anywhere in between, how many people in here sometimes doubt that what you believe is true? Look, if you don't have your hand up right now, you're probably not thinking very much. Come on. I've written books on this stuff, and sometimes I wake up in the morning and I go, I don't even know if this is true. You ever do that? But then when I start thinking about it, I realize that most of my doubts are emotional. They're not intellectual. In other words, the evidence for Christianity is really good. And if I'm having a good day, everything's fine. Bad day, don't know. Good day, fine. Bad day, don't know. Good day, fine. Bad. What's changing? Me or the evidence? Me, I'm going up and down. In fact, sometimes at these venues, I'll see people and they'll say, hey, Frank, I used to be a Christian, but I'm an atheist now. I lost my faith. Now, I don't mean to be unkind, but since I'm originally from New Jersey, sometimes I am. And when they say, I lost my faith, I want to say to them, so? So are you telling me because your psychology changed that God has somehow popped out of existence? Because your psychology changed? Jesus didn't rise from the dead? Do you realize that your psychology is not going to tell you whether or not anything's true? The evidence will. So your psychology can go up and down all day. What you need to focus on, what I need to focus on is the evidence, because the evidence will tell you whether or not it's true, not your psychology. In fact, there's a lot of people that are afraid to fly. Psychologically, they can't do it. But do you realize that that doesn't fit with the facts? That by far the safest way to get anywhere is to fly. But people don't want to do that because psychologically they think it's dangerous when the facts show it really isn't. So your psychology is not going to tell you whether or not something's true. About anything, the evidence will tell you, so concentrate on the evidence. And if you concentrate on the evidence, I think you'll realize that you ought to start doubting your doubts, because if you start doubting your doubts, then you're back to knowing something for sure. Have you guys thought about doubting your doubts? I doubt it. Oh, how about this one? You're going to hear this a lot too. This is probably the granddaddy in our culture right now. You ought not judge. First of all, what's the problem with the claim? Someone says you ought not judge, you turn the claim on itself, what do you say back? Hey, isn't that a judgment? Or you could say, then why are you judging me for judging? Because that's what they're doing. You say, wait a minute, Frank, didn't Jesus say don't judge? Nope, never said it. Sure he did. He said it in Matthew chapter 7, verse 1. All right, I know this is going to sound a little bit strange, but it's true. There are no verses in the Bible. There are no verses in the Bible. Do you think when Matthew's writing his biography of Jesus, we call a gospel, he said, here's chapter 7, verse 1? No. When were the chapter and verse divisions put in? About 500 years ago to help us navigate the text, which is good, right? Because if you go to church one Sunday and if the pastor said, open up 2/3 of the way through the book and let's see if we can find where we are. No, you need numbers, right? It's going to help you. The problem is we think if it has a number in front of it, we can just take it out and make it say whatever we want. Matthew 7:1 says, judge not. But what does it say right after that? Judge not, lest you be judged by the same standard you judge others, you be judged by that standard. So before you try and take the speck out of your brother's eye, you hypocrite, which is a judgment, take the log out of your own eye first, then you'll be better able to help your brother. Is Jesus telling us not to judge here? No, he's telling us to take the speck out of our brother's eye. That involves making a judgment. He's simply saying, get that problem out of your life first so you can better help your brother. So this is not a command not to judge. It's actually a command on how to judge. Don't judge hypocritically. If you've got that problem, fix it, then go help your brother. But it would be completely ridiculous to say don't make judgments. Why? Number one, it's a judgment itself. Number two, you'd be dead already if you didn't make judgments. You made 100 judgments just getting over here tonight. And now you're wondering, was that a good judgment? I don't know. This guy's kind of crazy. You make judgments all the time between good choices and bad choices, safe choices and dangerous choices. Everybody makes judgments. Atheists make judgments. What judgments do they make? There's no God. Jesus didn't rise from the dead. Bible's not true. There is no meaning to life. When you die, you're going to become worm food. It's hopeless. Have a nice day. Those are all judgments. The question isn't whether or not you can make judgments. The question is, are your judgments true? I will say this, though. Jesus did save a very stern rebuke for people who were judgmental. And who were the judgmental ones in his day? Who were they? Pharisees. What did the Pharisees do? They were the religious and political leaders of Israel. They helped run Israel. Rome delegated much of the lawmaking authority and the governance to the Sanhedrin, the Jewish ruling council, on whom some Pharisees were. So these were the religious and political leaders, and Jesus went after them. Are you telling me Jesus got involved in politics? Yes! And he wasn't so nice doing it. In fact, if you think Jesus was a sweet guy who's never said a bad word about anyone, you have not read John chapter 2, John chapter 8, or Matthew chapter 23. What happens in John chapter 2? Jesus makes a whip, and he goes and he jacks people up in the temple. What sweet and gentle Jesus did this? Yes. And then in John chapter 8, he's having an argument with these Pharisees, and he gets to the point in the conversation where he says, your father is the devil. Jesus, you can't say that. That's not very Christ-like. Excuse me, I am Christ. Can you imagine you're having an argument with somebody and you say, your father is the devil? Never say that to a sibling, by the way. Okay? In Matthew 23, he's going after these Pharisees again. What does he say? Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. Oh, you look great on the outside. You're whitewashed tombs, but on the inside, you're full of dead men's bones. You go a mile to make a convert, and then once you make them a convert, you make them twice as much a son of hell as you are. How will you avoid being condemned to hell? What? Sweet and gentle Jesus said this? Yes, Jesus was not Barney. Can't we all get along, boys and girls? No! I came to bring it a sword. It's going to divide mother and daughter, father and son. Jesus was tough. Read the accounts for yourself. He didn't suffer any fools. In fact, why was he killed? Number one, for claiming to be God, because that's blasphemy to the Jews and sedition to the Romans. And number two, he spoke truth to power, particularly the Jewish authorities who knew if he succeeded, they were out of business. In fact, Caiaphas himself, the high priest, saw that Jesus had resurrected Lazarus from the dead, or people that were there saw it and told him. And you know what he says? He says, we got to kill Jesus, and we got to kill Lazarus too, because it's better that one innocent man die than the whole nation perish. They knew he was doing miracles, and they still wanted to kill him. So, Jesus made judgments, and we have to make judgments without being judgmental. Somebody put it this way: evangelism is just one beggar showing another beggar where the food is. We're no better than anybody else without Jesus. By the way, I've noticed one other thing about judging. You ever notice when you compliment somebody, which is a judgment, nobody gets upset? You know, if you say to your best friend, I really loved you, you're such a wonderful person, I wish I could be like you. You think your friend's going to go, who are you to judge? No, never going to say that. I've noticed that people really don't have a problem with judging. They just have a problem with judgments they don't like. In fact, if you tell somebody the truth and they get mad at you, you just helped convict them. As Augustine said, we love the truth when it enlightens us. We hate the truth when it convicts us. For you military people in here, and years ago I was in the Navy, which stands for Never Again Volunteer Yourself. For you military people in here, you always get more flack when you're over the target. If you tell somebody the truth and they're shooting back at you, you're over the target. They don't want their evil deeds exposed. As Jesus said, we love darkness rather than light. So don't buy into this idea you can't make judgments. You have to make judgments. You'd be dead already if you didn't make judgments. You just have to make judgments without being judgmental. Now, we could talk about many more of these self-defeating statements. We don't have time for that. But can everybody see that this statement right here shoots itself? Can everybody see that? And all the other ones we just went through. All truth is relative. There's no the truth, just my truth. It's true for you, but not for me. The only truth comes from science. You ought not judge. All those, they're all self-defeating, which if our reasoning is right here, it means that relativism and postmodernism are false. Why? Because they claim it's true that there is no truth. So truth does exist. The next question is it true that God exists? Now, before we move on, I got to say one thing, because when we get to the Q&A, I may ask you a question. And it's not fair for me to ask you a question without giving you fair warning, okay? Here's the question I will ask you, especially if you're not a Christian. The question is, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? I've had atheists stand at that microphone in front of hundreds of people on college campuses, and they say, no. No. I thought you claimed to be reasonable. I thought you claimed to be rational. How rational is it that you wouldn't believe something if it were true? It's not rational. The problem isn't here. The problem's here. They don't want it to be true. They don't want there to be a God. Why? Because they want to be God of their own lives. They're not on a truth quest. And this is true of Christians too. Many times we're not on a truth quest. We're on a happiness quest, right? We're just going to believe whatever we think is going to make us happy. Here's the problem. You can make yourself happy over the short term, doing a lot of fun, but ultimately destructive things. Yet over the long term, this is a disaster. And anyone in here who's over 40 knows what I'm talking about, because many of us have tried it ourselves. The only way to get contentment is to go straight through truth, and Jesus is the truth. Now, let's spend most of our time here on point 2, because this is an important point. Does God exist? I mentioned there are 3 arguments. And oh, by the way, That's a question you should ask anybody. If Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? An atheist could ask, if atheism true, would you be an atheist? A Muslim could ask, if Islam was true, would you be a Muslim, right? See if people are really open or not. Anyway, what are the three arguments? First argument, from the beginning of the universe, known as the cosmological argument. Cosmological comes from the Greek word cosmos, which means world or universe. It says if the universe had a beginning, then it must have had a beginner. The second argument is the argument from design, known as the teleological argument. Telos is a Greek word meaning design or purpose. And it says if there's design in the universe and design in you, life, there must be a designer. Now, these two arguments have some scientific evidence behind them. We'll see some of it here in a minute. The third argument doesn't have any science behind it, yet it's the argument we've all known since we were very small children. And it's the argument from morality known as the moral argument. And it says if there's one thing morally wrong out there, just one, like it's wrong to torture babies for fun, or it's wrong to murder 6 million people in a Holocaust, then there has to be a God. Why? Because if there is no standard beyond humanity, then everything's just a matter of opinion. That's just your opinion against a baby torturer's opinion, or your opinion against Hitler's opinion. Well, we know those aren't really just matters of opinion, so there must be a standard out there, a standard of goodness, righteousness, and justice that we're obligated to obey, and any deviation from that standard is what we would call evil. That's what all theists mean by God's nature. We'll get to that later. Let's start right here at the cosmological argument. Now, you got to admit, it was worth coming out here tonight just to see God do that. Wasn't it? I mean, some of you have said, I've never seen God move. Oh, really? Check this out. Now, this is the argument that many say points back to the big... Now, some of you Christians in here are going, Frank, you know, we're Christians here. We don't believe in the Big Bang. You guys don't believe in the Big Bang? I believe in the Big Bang. I just know who banged it. In fact, the evidence for the Big Bang is so good that even atheistic scientists are admitting it. Stephen Hawking, who was the top physicist in the world probably until he died about 4 years ago. You may remember Hawking. He had ALS. Normally, ALS will kill you in a few years. He had it for over 40. He was kind of a medical miracle. But here's what Hawking said. He said, almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning at the Big Bang. Hawking tried to come up with another explanation other than God for the beginning, but he failed. Yet he's admitting the data. What's the data? That space, time, and matter literally came into existence out of nothing. What is nothing? Aristotle had a good definition of nothing. He said nothing is what rocks dream about. That's nothing. No space, no matter, no time. Alexander Vilenkin, a Russian cosmologist, an agnostic, put it this way. He said, with the proof now in place, cosmologists, and by the way, a cosmologist is not someone that puts on your makeup, all right? Cosmologist studies the universe. Cosmologists can no longer hide behind the possibility of a past eternal universe. There is now no escape. They have to face the problem of a cosmic beginning. Now, I want to highlight two words in this quote. The first word is the word proof. Scientists rarely use the word proof because science is tentative. But with Vilenkin, who's not a believer, he just sees so many lines of evidence pointing toward one conclusion, that space-time and matter had a beginning, that he's admitting that it constitutes a proof. Also, it's a problem. Why is it a problem? They have to face a cosmic beginning. Because if space-time and matter had a beginning, then there must be something outside of space-time and matter that brought it into existence. In other words, nature can't be a cause. You can't find a natural cause for all of nature. Nature is the effect. It can't be the cause. Now, Vilenkin is actually a believer in the multiverse. You've heard about the multiverse? There are many universes out there, and we just happen to be the one that by luck we got here. Actually, there's no evidence for this multiverse, and there are other problems with it. But Vilenkin even admits, even if there's other universes out there, the whole show, the whole thing needs an absolute beginning. So it seems to me you don't get rid of the need for an absolute beginner. Now, we're not going to go through the evidence for this. Why? Number one, we don't have time. Number 2, it's all in the book, chapter 3. And number 3, it's not controversial. Atheists, agnostic scientists are admitting it. Let's just jump to the bottom line. If the universe had a beginner, or had a beginning, it must have had a beginner. The evidence leaves us with one of the following 2 options. Either no one created something out of nothing, which is the atheistic view, or someone created something out of nothing, which is the theistic view. Now, which view is more reasonable? What do you think? Number 2, right? Someone created something out of nothing. 15 or so years ago, I was at Texas A&M, and a student who was an atheist said, "Oh, I think number 1 is more reasonable." I said, "Hold on, let's look at number 2 first." Number 2 says someone created something out of nothing. Now, that's a miracle, right? But at least you got a miracle worker. You got someone. Number 1 is a miracle with no miracle worker. That's clearly absurd. In fact, do you realize that everybody believes in at least one miracle? Christians believe in more than one, but we certainly believe in this one. But atheists believe in one too. They believe, at least some of them do, that no one created something out of nothing. Which one takes more faith, do you think? In fact, I said to the audience that night at Texas A&M, I said, to show you how seriously we all take the law of causality. And by the way, the law of causality doesn't say everything has a cause. The law of causality says everything that comes to be has a cause. Everything that has a beginning has a cause. There has to be an uncaused first cause. It's either the universe or something outside the universe that has always existed, because you can't create yourself. So I said, to show you how seriously we all take the law of causality, that things don't pop into existence out of nothing, by nothing. There is nobody in this auditorium here tonight who is currently worried that as you sit here, a hippopotamus has appeared out of nothing by nothing in your dorm room and is currently pooping on your pillow, right? You're not worried about that. Why? Because you know that things don't pop into existence out of nothing by nothing without a cause. And if they did, if the whole universe could do that, why doesn't everything pop into existence out of nothing by nothing without a cause? Why don't Teslas pop into existence out of nothing by nothing without a cause? You wake up one morning, your Hyundai is a Tesla. You go, how do I charge this thing? Why don't MacBook Pros pop into existence out of nothing by nothing without a cause? Could have saved me $4,000. If you're hungry after this and you want to have a pizza, does it make sense to order one? Or should you just sit in your kitchen, wait, and hope one pops into existence out of nothing by nothing without a cause? No, it seems to me the atheists have all the faith. In fact, here's a question to ask an atheist. If there is no God, why is there something rather than nothing at all? That's Leibniz's question. Philosopher a couple hundred years ago. If there is no God, why is there something rather than nothing at all? Now, think about this, ladies and gentlemen. If space, time, and matter literally had a beginning out of nothing, which is what the evidence seems to be pointing to, then whatever created space, time, and matter can't be made of space, time, and matter. In other words, the cause must be spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful to create the universe out of nothing, personal in order to choose to create, because to go from a state of nothingness to a state of creation, someone had to make a choice, and only persons can make choices. The being would also have to be intelligent to have a mind to make a choice. Now, when you think about a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, intelligent cause, who do you think of? God. You say, well, how do you know it's the Christian God, Frank? We don't. Yet. I mean, this could be Allah or some other theistic God. But if we keep going through the questions, we're going to realize that the same being that walked out of the tomb 1,988 years ago is the same being in whose divine nature created the universe out of nothing. But we haven't gotten there yet. All we can say is we have some of the attributes of God from this one argument. A spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, intelligent cause. Now we got to move on to the second argument, the design argument, the teleological argument, and there are two aspects to this. The universe appears to be designed, and life appears to be designed. Let's look at the universe first. This is known as the fine-tuning of the universe. Scientists in recent decades have discovered that the universe is so fine-tuned that if you were to change any one of a number of factors about our universe, virtually imperceptibly, there would either be no universe or certainly no universe that could support life. We'll start again with an atheist, Stephen Hawking, who put it this way about the expansion rate of the universe. He said if the expansion rate of the universe was different by 1 part in 1,000 million, a second after the Big Bang, the universe would have collapsed back on itself or never developed galaxies. If the expansion rate was that infinitesimally different from the very beginning, none of us would be here. Now, you can't make any sort of evolutionary explanation for this. You can't say, oh, the expansion rate evolved there by chance, whatever that means. Why? Because this is one of the initial conditions of the universe. It didn't evolve to a point. It started there. Seems to me the same being that created space, time, and matter is the same being that fine-tuned the expansion rate so we could be here. Also, the gravitational force, if it were altered by more than 1 in 10 to the 40th power, we wouldn't exist. What's 1 in 10 to the 40th power? That's 1 part in 1 with 40 zeros following it. You say, Frank, I can't get my head around that number. I know, neither can I, so let me give you an illustration. Take a tape measure and stretch it across the entire known universe. That's a long way. You can't get that tape measure at Lowe's, all right? Set the gravitational force at a particular inch mark on that tape measure. I realize gravity's not measured in inches. This is just to give you a scale idea in your mind. If the strength of gravity were different by 1 inch in either direction across a scale as wide as the entire known universe, we wouldn't be here. I don't have enough faith to believe that that value just landed there by chance. And oh, by the way, does chance cause things? Who caused this? Chance. He was just here. No. Chance is not a cause. Chance is a word we use to describe mathematical possibilities. When scientists use the word chance, you know what they really mean? We don't know. Look, there's only 2 reasons that value is where it is. It was designed to be there, or it wasn't. What do you think's more reasonable? Somebody designed it to be right where it is. And you could say this about a dozen other factors about our universe. Change any one of them imperceptibly, we're not here. And it's not just the universe that appears designed. Our solar system appears to be designed with us in mind. Let's take a look at the solar system here for a second. Here we are, 3rd rock from the sun. If we were just a little bit closer to or a little bit further away, we couldn't survive. A little bit closer to, we'd burn up. A little bit further away, we'd freeze. We are what scientists call the Goldilocks zone. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. It is. That's a lie. It's too hot here in the summer. Axial tilt, 23.5 degrees. Change that slightly, we don't exist. Earth rotation, 24 hours. Change that slightly, we don't exist. The size and distance of the moon from us. Change that slightly, we don't exist. If Jupiter was not in its current orbit, we couldn't exist here on Earth. Why? What does Jupiter do for us? Jupiter's gravitational force makes it a cosmic vacuum cleaner. It attracts most of the meteors and space junk to it rather than us. In fact, if you take a close-up look at Jupiter, these dark marks are comet fragment strikes that are bigger than the Earth. Thank God for Jupiter. Because if Jupiter wasn't there, we wouldn't be here. Same is true of Saturn. It's a cosmic vacuum cleaner as well. In fact, take a look at the planets here. You got Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Earth. Look at poor Pluto down here. You know, Pluto recently has been demoted as a planet. I don't know about you, but I think it's size discrimination. Take a look at this. You can hardly see Pluto. Take a look at this. That's Arcturus. That's another star in our galaxy. Here's the sun. Jupiter is 1 pixel in size on this scale. Earth is invisible. Pluto? Forget about it. All right, keep an eye on Arcturus now. Where's Arcturus now? Way over here. Right of the white star Regal. That's Antares. That's another star in our galaxy. Not outside our galaxy, in our galaxy. The sun is 1 pixel in size on this scale. Jupiter is invisible. Earth, Pluto, forget about them. In fact, if the Earth was the size of a golf ball, Betelgeuse here Look, I don't name the stars, okay? If the Earth was the size of a golf ball, Beetlejuice would be 5 or 6 Empire State Buildings high. The heavens are awesome. And this is just in our galaxy. And the average distance between stars in our galaxy is 30 trillion miles. And all that distance is necessary for us to exist here on Earth. Now, how far is 30 trillion miles? Far. Take you at least 2 tanks of gas in a Toyota Prius to go 30 trillion miles. A number of years ago, my wife and I were out at the Desert Museum in Tucson, Arizona. And if you ever get to go to Tucson, go on the south side of the mountain range there. And in this Desert Museum, if you go there at night and it's a clear night, you can see thousands of stars in the sky. So we're out there this night, and the guide goes, if we look up at 9:03, we will see the space shuttle in orbit. I said, oh, come on, we're not going to see the space shuttle. It's only 120 feet long. It's 350 miles up. We're not going to see it. Oh, me of little faith. At 9:03, the guide goes, look! And we look up in the sky about 70 degrees above the horizon. There's an object streaking out of the western desert sky relative to us about like this. I mean, it's really cooking. When it got right about here, it disappeared. I don't know whether Scotty beamed it up or what. Actually, what happened was, despite the fact that we were in total darkness, the space shuttle was so high up that the sun was still reflecting off of it, and when it got out of the range of the sun, we couldn't see it anymore. Now, when the space shuttle was in orbit, the space shuttle was traveling at about 18,000 miles an hour. That's 5 miles per second. You got trouble getting to school in the morning? Take the space shuttle. You'll be here 5 miles a second. Think about how fast that is. Well, I did a little calculation to try and figure out how long would it take us if we could get in the space shuttle and go from our star, the sun, to another star an average distance away in our galaxy, not outside our galaxy. How long would it take us to go from one star to another star going 5 miles a second? How long do you think it would take us to go these 30 trillion miles? Anyone? That's a little long. What would you think? Years, yeah. A long time. You must be a math major. Yeah, it would take us 201,450 years. That means if you got in the space shuttle at the time of Christ and started traveling from our star, the sun, to another star in our galaxy, an average distance away, you've been going 5 miles a second for 2,000 years. You would be less than 1/100th of the way there right now. And we're going to explore space. No, we're not. We're not going anywhere in space. We can hardly get out of our solar system. It took us 9 years to get to Pluto. And just how high are the heavens? The psalmist writes in Psalm 103, for as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his love for those who fear him. How high are the heavens above the earth? The Hubble Space Telescope has helped us discover that. I'm about to show you something from Hubble Ultra Deep Field. What's Hubble Ultra Deep Field? They trained the Hubble Space Telescope on 1/24 of the sky. What's 1/24 of the sky? Go outside tonight, put a piece of rice on the end of your finger, hold it up. That piece of rice represents about 1/24 of the sky. So they trained Hubble on that. And what I'm going to show you is the ultimate picture they took. This little video you can find on Google. Just Google Hubble Ultra Deep Field. It's in the public domain. And this video, I don't know if you can see this, but these are mountains here. You see that? This is the southern sky. Once I start the video, you're going to see the constellations come up, and then Hubble's going to zoom in on 1/24 of the sky. There is no audio. It's just video. You want to see what they found? Here we go. There are the constellations. Now let's zoom in on 1/24 of the sky. What you're looking at are nearly 10,000 galaxies in 1/24 millionth of the sky, each galaxy with billions of stars. How many stars are there in the universe? Researchers at the University of Hawaii think they figured it out. The number of stars in the universe are about equivalent to the number of grains of sand on all the beaches on all the earth times 100,000. And to go from one of those stars to another star just in our galaxy at 5 miles a second will take you over 200,000 years. Now you know why the Bible says the heavens declare the glory of God. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want anybody here to ever again use the word awesome unless you're talking about the heavens or God. Awesome shirt, dude. Awesome shot, dude. Awesome TikTok video. No! None of that's awesome. This is awesome. What are you going to say for the heavens? What are you going to say for God if you throw awesome around too often? As high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his love to those that fear him. The verse doesn't end. How does it continue? For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his love for those who fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far as he removed our transgressions from us. The God of the universe not only created and sustains this entire universe, he loves his creation. He loves you as high as the heavens are above the earth. As high as the stars from 100,000 earths, sand grains of 100,000 earths spread out over an unimaginable distance. Now when you consider something like that, do you feel insignificant? Yeah, you shouldn't. Why? Because as beautiful and amazing as the heavens are, they're not made in the image of God, but you are. So the second aspect of design is the fact that you're designed. In fact, this is you in the womb at 11 weeks. Question, is this animal, mineral, vegetable, or human? That's a human being right there. In fact, let's go back even earlier than 11 weeks. Let's go back to when your mother and your father got together to conceive you. Have you guys had this talk before? I see some young people in here, so I'll try and be discreet. I also see some older people in here, so I'll try and be discreet as well, just in case you've forgotten how this works. When your mother and your father got together to conceive you, your mother unconsciously perfumed her egg to attract your father, and then your father sent the entire population of the United States, 300 million soldiers, toward your mother's egg. And then there was a race, and you won. Don't let anyone ever tell you you're not special. You beat out 300 million others. You have blown away anything Michael Phelps has done. Now, seeing some of you limping here earlier makes it hard for me to believe you were the fastest soldier in the gene pool. But you were. Your soldier was 20 to 30 times smaller than a grain of salt, yet it contained half of the 3.2 billion letter software program we call your genome, all the letters in the right order, It contained that half in that microscopic little soldier, and your mother's egg was about the size of a period at the end of a sentence in an average book, and it contained the other half of the 3.2 billion letter software program we call your genome, and when your soldier and your egg came together, a new 100% genetic human being was created. You know, you have not received any more genetic information from this point till right now. In fact, there were only 4 things separating you from adulthood: time, air, water, and food. Those are the same 4 things that separate a 2-year-old from adulthood. Does this have implications on the abortion issue? Yeah, I think it does. We don't kill the 2-year-old. Why do we kill the unborn child in the womb? Genetically, it's the same. You say, wait a minute, Frank, you can't legislate morality. All right, no extra charge for this. This comes from our first book, creatively titled Legislating Morality. All laws legislate morality. Every law declares one behavior right and the opposite behavior wrong. You can't think of a law that doesn't legislate morality. The only question is, whose morality will we legislate? In fact, when people say, don't impose your morality on me, I go, why not? Would that be immoral? Actually, you're doing the same thing. You're saying I ought not impose ought nots, yet you're imposing that ought not on me. Why do you get to impose your morality, but I don't get to impose mine? Actually, the better answer is this. When people say, don't impose your morality on me, I say, this isn't my morality. I didn't make this stuff up. I didn't make up the fact that murder's wrong, that abortion's wrong, that rape is wrong, that theft is wrong, that men were made for women and women were made for men, and the best way to perpetuate and stabilize society, which is the reason the government's involved in marriage to begin with, is to legally recognize the man-woman relationship over every other relationship. I didn't make any of this stuff up. This isn't my morality. This isn't your morality. This just happens to be the morality. The one Thomas Jefferson said was self-evident. The one the Apostle Paul said, the Gentiles are not of the law written on their hearts. Everybody already knows this morality, but some people just don't like it. In fact, if you have a problem with the morality, you don't have a problem with me. You have the problem with the Creator upon whose morality or upon whose nature this morality is derived. All right, no extra charge for that. Let's go back to this. From this point till right now, a construction project of astonishing complexity began taking place. Cells began multiplying at a rate of 4,000 cells per second. Brain cells began multiplying at a rate of 100,000 cells per second. For most of you, anyway. Some cells became brain cells, others lung cells, others heart cells. How did they know how to do this? Nobody knows. Some cells went so far across you to become what they needed to become that it would be equivalent to you today walking across the United States alone. And that construction project continues to this day. You just made 4 million new red blood cells. You just made another 4 million new red blood cells. You just made another 4 million. Knock it off. How is this happening? Are you thinking about this? Are you going, wait a minute, Frank, time out, got to concentrate, new red blood cells coming up? No, this is just happening. How is it happening? You know, Aristotle recognized something 2,400 years ago. Of course, he didn't know anything about blood cells, but he did notice that all of nature's going in a direction. For example, why does an acorn, if it's properly nourished, always become an oak tree? Why doesn't it become an elm tree or a birch tree or a seahorse? You say, well, it's programmed to become an oak tree. But who programmed it? And is an acorn conscious? Is an acorn in the ground going, all right, what do I have to do to become an oak tree? No. If it doesn't have a mind of its own, and it doesn't, yet it reliably goes in a direction, there must be an external mind directing it toward that end. Aristotle called this the unmoved mover. Thomas Aquinas came along in the 1200s AD and said, this is going to be my 5th way to argue for God, that all of nature's going in a direction. He called it final causality. It's going toward a target, a goal. It has the products of a mind, but it's not conscious. So there must be an external mind directing all these things toward an end. The Apostle Paul comes along and he says, in Christ we live and move and have our being, and Christ holds all things together. And the writer of Hebrews says, God sustains all things by his powerful word. What does all this mean? In other words, this argument is not it's not a cause about a Big Bang cause way back when. This is in fact, Aristotle mistakenly thought the universe was eternal. He's saying you need a cause every single second of existence to keep everything going in the direction it's going. This is a sustaining cause, not a first cause, a sustaining here and now cause. In fact, God is to the universe and to us what a band is to music. If a band were up here playing music, the band would be creating and sustaining the music. What happens to the music the second the band stops playing? Music's over. Same thing is true with God. He creates the universe, He creates you and the natural laws that govern it, and He sustains the universe, and He sustains you and the natural laws that govern you. If all of us, if God decided that this was it, we'd all go out of existence. Now, there's a lot more in the Stealing from God book about that, but we got to move on to our final argument. Now, you're probably wondering, well, how is he going to get through these two other points? The other 2 points go much quicker. But the moral argument. Let me ask you guys a question. How do you know that your quarterback throwing a touchdown is better than your quarterback throwing an interception? How do you know that? What do you have to know in order to make that judgment? Not just the rules. You have to know the purpose of the game, right? If there's no purpose to the game, you can't say a touchdown is better than an interception. The only way you can say a touchdown is better is because it takes you closer to the purpose rather than further away. There has to be a purpose for you to know whether a play is good or a play is bad. Now, notice in football, the purpose of the game comes from outside the game. The players don't make up the rules. The commissioner and the owners make up the rules, and they tweak them every year, right? And so when the players get on the field, they know how the game is played and how they're going to try and win. They know what a good play is from a bad play because they know the purpose. Now, the rules of football are arbitrary. The rules of life are not, but they come from outside the game. They come from God's nature. If there is no nature, if there is no standard, if there is no purpose, you can't say one way to live is better than another way. Also, let me ask you guys a question. What does the word submit mean? What does it mean to... Nobody likes this word, submit. Let's break up the word. Submission. What does mission mean? It means we have a goal. We have a purpose. And sub means you're putting your purpose underneath that purpose. Look, if I'm a diva receiver and I say, keep throwing me the ball, I need the ball more. And the coach goes, look, if we're going to win, we can't keep throwing the ball to you. You'll get your shot, but we got to spread the ball around, otherwise we're not going to win. Now, if I go, okay, coach, I got it. I'm going to submit my purpose to the team's purpose. Now I'm submitting to the overall mission, which is a good thing. Do you realize if there is no God, there is no overall mission? There's no purpose to life. But if there is a God, you ought to submit your personal mission to that because that is the ultimate mission. God's will is the ultimate mission. If there is no God, nothing's ultimately going to last anyway. There is no mission. If God does exist, what could be greater than putting your own personal mission under the mission of the eternal being who created you and wants a relationship with you? Realize, if there is no God, the Nazis were not wrong. How can you judge the Nazis wrong? They were just following their government. Well, if there's no standard beyond governments, you can't say the Nazis were wrong. By the way, that's how we convicted them at Nuremberg. They said, we're following orders, and we said you had a moral obligation to disobey immoral orders because there's a standard beyond your government. It's called international law. Thomas Jefferson called it nature's law, the Declaration of Independence. C.S. Lewis called it the moral law. It's God's nature. If God doesn't exist, you can't say the Nazis were wrong. You can't say that love is better than rape. Love is no better than rape objectively. Oh, you may like love better than rape, but it's not better because there is no best. If there is no God, there are no human rights. On a college campus, we all have a very developed sense of justice, and we're saying we got a right to this and we got a right to that. Do you realize if there's no God, there's no right to anything? There's not only no right to same-sex marriage, there's no right to natural marriage. There's not only no right to abortion, there's no right to life. There are no rights. It's just your opinion. The only reason rights make sense is because there's a being who is the standard of rightness, and he's endowed us with his image. And that's why we're valuable. Without that, there are no rights. Which means racism isn't wrong if there's no God. Slavery isn't wrong. Rape isn't wrong. Murder isn't wrong. It's all a matter of opinion if God does not exist. Tolerance is no better than intolerance if there's no God. By the way, are Christians commanded to be tolerant? No. Tolerance is too weak. Tolerance says hold your nose and put up with them. Love says reach out and help them. And if you truly love people, you won't tolerate the evil they want to do. In fact, let me ask you guys a question. In our culture, people think that love means approval. If you love me, you'll approve of what I do. Ladies and gentlemen, how many people in here have parents? Oh, good. How many people in here are former children? Okay, good. This applies to all of us then. If your parents approved of everything you wanted to do growing up, would they be loving? No, of course not. They need to stand in the way of evil if they truly love you. And the way you love people sometimes is to say, no, I love you too much. I'm going to stand in the way of this. It's not tolerance. That's love. And you can't complain about the problem of evil if there's no God, because actually evil proves God does exist. What do I mean evil proves God does exist? A lot of atheists say, well, there can't be a good God because there's too much evil in the world. And C.S. Lewis thought that for a while until he realized he had a big problem. He ultimately wrote it in the book Mere Christianity. Here's what he said. He said, as an atheist, my argument against God was that the universe seems so cruel and unjust. But how had I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing this universe with when I called it unjust? See, you wouldn't know what a crooked line was unless you knew what a straight line was. You wouldn't know what injustice was unless you knew what justice was. Something can't be not right unless something is right. Something can't be immoral unless something is moral. In other words, evil is a lack in a good thing. Evil doesn't exist on its own. Evil is like cancer. If you take all the cancer out of a good body, you got a better body. What happens if you take all the body out of the cancer? Doesn't exist. Evil is like rust in a car. If you take all the rust out of a car, you got a better car. What happens if you take all the car out of the rust? Doesn't exist. Evil doesn't exist on its own. You could put it this way. The shadows prove the sunshine. In order to have shadows, you got to have sunshine. In other words, in order to have evil, you have to have good. Oh, you can have good without evil. You can have sunshine without shadows, but you can't have evil without good. You can't have shadows without sunshine. So if evil exists, and we all know it does, then good must exist. But if good exists, that means God exists. Because God is the standard of good. Without God, everything's just a matter of opinion. Now, we can still ask the question, well, if there is a good God, why doesn't he allow certain evils to occur? That's another question we don't have time to get into here. We can talk about it during the Q&A if we want, but we can't say evil disproves God, because evil actually shows God does exist. Now, what can we say about these three arguments? That we have a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, intelligent cause who created all things and sustains all things and is a moral being. We've got like 9 or 10 attributes of God, and we haven't even opened the Bible yet. This is called natural theology. You can show that a theistic God exists just by looking at nature. Now, some of you are going, Frank, atheists have to have some retorts to this, and they're probably pretty good. Actually, they're not. And if anyone wants to bring up some during the Q&A, we can. I just want to point out something C.S. Lewis said about this, that atheism itself makes reason impossible. Because if we're molecular machines, we shouldn't be able to reason. And most atheists today are materialists. They think everything's made of molecules. Here's a two-slide quote from Lewis. I can't say it better than him, so check this out. Here's what he said. Follow this. Suppose there were no intelligence behind the universe, In that case, nobody designed my brain for the purpose of thinking. Thought is merely the byproduct of some atoms within my skull. But if so, how can I trust my own thinking to be true? But if I can't trust my own thinking, of course I can't trust the arguments leading to atheism, and therefore have no reason to be an atheist or anything else. Unless I believe in God, I can't believe in thought, so I can never use thought to disbelieve in God. Boom, as John Madden would say. Can't say it any better than that. Atheism itself makes reason impossible. So if you're going to try and refute some of these arguments, by what system are you using? You're using reason? How can you reason when your mind wasn't created? You don't think your mind was designed. Why should you believe anything your mind tells you then? We could talk more about that, but we got to move on to question number 3, are miracles possible? And this is the shortest one. We know that truth exists, we know that God exists, and now the question is, are miracles possible? And a lot of people think miracles are impossible. For example, Noah and the ark. All right, Christians. By the way, is this being recorded? Yeah, it's actually being streamed right now. All right, let's just try and keep this between ourselves. Christians. Can we just agree on one thing here? That Noah and the ark is crazy. Thank you, it is. And a resurrection. How many people in here have seen someone rise from the dead? No one. Yet, for Christianity to be true, we have to believe something that no one here has ever seen. How rational is that? And for some reason, the big problem miracle in the Bible is Jonah. Is that a whale of a tale or a tale of a whale? I mean, what is the deal with Jonah? Can you really believe in Jonah and the whale? I mean, come on. Actually, what is the greatest miracle in the Bible? It's not the resurrection. The greatest miracle in the Bible is... I got some of you a second time. Yeah. The greatest miracle in the Bible is the first verse. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. If that verse is true, every other verse is at least possible, right? If it's true that God created the universe out of nothing, can he do whatever he wants inside the universe? Of course he can. And here, the atheists are admitting the data for the first miracle. Stephen Hawking is admitting space-time and matter had a beginning out of nothing. Well, if that's true and God created the universe out of nothing, then maybe these other verses are true. Of course Noah's crazy unless God exists. Of course resurrections can't occur unless God exists. Of course Jonah is silly unless God exists. In fact, Jesus referred 2 of the most controversial miracles in the Old Testament to his own life, Noah and Jonah. Do you think he thought they were hysterical or historical? He thought they were historical. Now, a lot of people won't believe in miracles because they've never seen one. That's not a good reason to disbelieve something. Why? Because you believe in a lot of things you've never seen. You believe in your mind. Have you ever seen it? You're using it right now. You believe in the laws of non-contradiction, or the laws of logic and the laws of math. Have you ever seen them? No, it's not something you see. You've never seen justice, yet you believe in justice. Oh, you may have seen people being treated justly or unjustly, but you don't see justice in itself. It's not a physical thing. It's an immaterial reality grounded in the nature of God. You've never seen love. Oh, you may have been loved. You may have loved somebody, but you've never seen love. A number of years ago, I had a couple of debates with the atheist Christopher Hitchens. You guys know who Christopher Hitchens was? He was a brilliant British atheist who sounded more brilliant than he was because he had a British accent. And in one of our debates, a student at the College of New Jersey asked Christopher this question. He said, "Hey, Christopher, what is love?" And Christopher, being a materialist, had to give him a materialistic answer. He said, "Love is a chemical." And I said, "Don't tell that to your wife. I mean, honey, do you love me?" "Yeah." "Why?" "Well, because I got the chemical today. Right? Tomorrow I won't have the chemical." No, love is not a chemical. Love is an immaterial virtue grounded in the nature of God. All of us believe in it, and we've never seen it. You've never seen gravity. "Oh, Frank, come on. Look, there's gravity right there." Nope. You're not seeing gravity. What are you seeing? You're seeing the effects of gravity. By the way, that's how we know God exists. We know God by his effects. If somebody asks you, how do you know God exists? You say, I know God by his effects. This is what scientists do. They reason from effect to cause. If there's a creation, there must be a creator. The effect is creation, the cause is a creator. If there's design, that's the effect, there must be a cause, a designer. If there's a moral law written on their heart, that's an effect, there must be a moral law giver. So we're reasoning from effect back to cause. You've never seen George Washington, yet you believe he existed. Why? Because he's left effects behind that are best explained by the person known as George Washington, even though you've never seen him. Same thing can be true of Jesus. He's left effects behind. In fact, if miracles do occur, and by the way, miracles don't have to occur now for Christianity to be true. If no miracles occurred since Jesus and the apostles, Christianity could still be true. But even if miracles occur today, you ought not see a lot of them. Why? Because miracles, by definition, have to be rare. If miracles occurred all the time, they wouldn't get our attention, would they? We'd go, hey, this stuff happens all the time. It's no big deal. I mean, imagine if people rose from the dead routinely. What would the resurrection of Christ mean to us? Nothing. You go to somebody, you go, Jesus rose from the dead to prove he was God. And the guy goes, so what? Uncle Leroy just rose from the dead 2 weeks ago. Now I got to give the inheritance back. No, it's got to be a rare event if it's going to get your attention. They can't be miracles happening all the time, because miracles in the Bible are used to confirm a message from God. The sign confirms the sermon. They got to be rare events. Although I submit to you, there's a lot of things that happen routinely every day that if they didn't happen routinely, we'd call them miracles. How many women in here, well, how many moms do we have in here? You've seen your own children born. How many dads have seen your own children born? Now, when you see that, which it happens every day, when you see that, you don't go, evolution, right? You go, wow, this is amazing. How does this happen? But it happens every day. Do you realize for atheism to be true, every single spiritual experience and miracle claim in the history of the world has to be false? Is that possible? Yeah, it's possible. Is it reasonable? No. So, miracles are certainly possible if God exists. Last point, is the New Testament true? We know that truth exists, God exists, miracles are possible, but did God do a miracle about 2,000 years ago, the miracle known as the resurrection? Because if he did, then Christianity is true. If he didn't, it's not. Now, I'm going to give you 8 lines of evidence they're telling the truth. We don't have much time here to cover any of them. We're just going to look at 2 of them very briefly. But I'll list them. They all begin with the letter E, to help you remember them. There are early sources. The New Testament's written early, and it has early sources. There are eyewitness details throughout the text. This is all in chapter 10 of I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. There's embarrassing stories. I'll explain that in a minute, and as well as excruciating deaths. We're going to look at those 2, 3, and 4. Number 5, there's embedded confirmation. This is the best evidence you've never heard about that is telling you that the New Testament writers are independently witnessing the same historical events. I don't have time to explain it right here, but if you want to read about it, just Google 2 words: undesigned coincidences. Undesigned coincidences. In fact, a scholar from Western Michigan University, Lydia McGrew, wrote a book on this about 3 or 4 years ago called Hidden in Plain View. When you see these undesigned coincidences, you're going to go, yeah, these New Testament writers had to witness the same events. They couldn't have made this up. Also, expected predictions. That deals with Old Testament prophecy. If I only had one Old Testament prophecy to make my case on, it would be Isaiah chapter 53, written 700 years in advance. There's extra-biblical writers. Those are people like Josephus, Suetonius, Thallus, Phlegon, household names I know, that live within 150 years of Jesus' life, and they reference Jesus and the apostles and what happened to them. And when you add up their brief references, you get a story congruent with the New Testament. Finally, there's the explosive growth of the church out of Jerusalem, which is really hard to explain. because Christianity could have been squashed immediately by the Romans or the Jews who wanted it squashed by simply doing one simple thing. What could they have done? Taken the body out of the tomb. Everybody knew where the tomb was. They didn't do that. They couldn't do that. Why? Because Jesus was still using his body. He had resurrected. But you could have stopped Christianity easily by saying, stop all this nonsense talk about the resurrection. He's dead. Here's his body. Couldn't do that. Now, as I say, we only have time to cover a couple of these. Let's just cover embarrassing stories. Embarrassing stories. What's that? This is a principle historians use to try and discover if a writer or group of writers is telling the truth. It goes like this. If there's something embarrassing to the author or authors, it's probably true. Why? Because you're not going to invent things that make yourself look bad, right? You're not going to embarrass yourself. In fact, let me ask you guys this. How many people in here have ever lied to make yourself look good? If you don't have your hand up right now, you're lying to make yourself look good, and it's not working. We know you're lying. All right, how many people in here have ever lied to make yourself look bad? You don't do that. You might lie to make yourself look good, but you won't lie to make yourself look bad. Well, the New Testament writers have filled the New Testament with embarrassing details that make themselves look bad, and that looks bad right there. I don't know how that happened. What happened there? You saw it all. Stand by. Okay. Well, I actually don't need the PowerPoint for this right here. So hang on a second. Stand by for vectors, Victor. Call for clearance. Boom. That's why we call this the dove factor. They're not making this up. I mean, think about this. Peter, their leader, is called Satan by Jesus. Do you think Mark, who wrote this down, at one point said to Peter, hey, Pete, I'm going to make this a real interesting story. I'm going to have the Lord call you Satan. What do you think Peter would have said? Have him call you Satan. Look, I'm the leader here. This doesn't look good. And then Peter says, Lord, I'll never deny you. What does he wind up doing? He denies him 3 times. And then at the crucifixion, all the disciples, with the possible exception of John, they all run away. This is like a Monty Python movie. Run away! They all run away. And who are the brave ones? The women. The women are the brave ones. Now, who wrote the New Testament down? Men. Now, what man is going to invent that he was hiding for fear of the Jews why the women went down and discovered the empty tomb? Would any man in here invent that? No. If I was there, I'd make myself look good, wouldn't you? I'd write something down like this. Let's see. We marched right down there and we overpowered that elite Roman guard. That sounds pretty good. John said, get out. Peter roundhouse kicked him. Philip said, we'll be back. And then on Sunday morning, we marched right down to the tomb, and we saw Jesus, who congratulated us on our great faith. And then we went and comforted the trembling women. I would never say I was Mr. Sissy Pants while the women went down and discovered the empty tomb. And oh, by the way, why would you never say the women were the first witnesses in that culture? Forget about the fact that it was embarrassing to men. It was. But why would you never invent that little detail anyway? Yes, because a woman's testimony was not considered on par with that of a man. So if you're making up the New Testament story, you'd only have the men be the first witnesses. Yet all 4 Gospels say the women were the first witnesses, which is telling us what? They really were. As embarrassing as it was, they're just telling the truth. I actually had a woman come up to me once. She said, Frank, I know why Jesus appeared to the women first. I said, why? And she said, because he wanted to get the story out. I said, that is an excellent point. I hadn't thought of that. Because ladies, when your man comes home from work, does he say much? There could have been a nuclear explosion down at the plant. He's not going to tell you. You'll see it on the news before you hear it from him. You'll be watching the news going, hey, hon, what the? Oh, yeah, forgot to tell you the nuke blew up. I've been hot for 3 days. What's for dinner? Right? He's not going to tell you. I can't even believe this next verse is in the New Testament, but it is. This is the Great Commission. You know the Great Commission? Go therefore, make disciples of all nations. Notice he doesn't say make believers, right? There's a difference. Anyway, as Jesus is giving his disciples the Great Commission before he's about to ascend to heaven, I mean, this is it. It says that they're standing there, and some of the disciples believed, but some doubted. This is Matthew 28:17. Some believed, but some doubted. They're standing there going, you see that guy over there? Yep. That guy over there is Jesus. Oh, no, it can't be Jesus. I'm telling you, he was killed not long ago. No, I'm telling you, it's him. Look, Jesus is dead. The Romans killed him. It's him. Look, the spear went in his side. Blood and water came out. They crucified him. He's dead. It's him. It can't be. It is. How do you know? The women told me. They're not making this up. There's even potentially embarrassing details about Jesus in there. Jesus is called out of his mind by his own family who want to seize him and take him home. This is in Mark chapter 3. His own family thinks he's nuts. You may have heard the scholars say, the New Testament writers embellish Jesus to be God. Oh, really? Then why is Mark chapter 3 in there, which is almost universally recognized to be the earliest gospel? They think he's crazy. He's out of his mind. Jesus is called a drunkard. He's called demon-possessed. He has his feet wiped with the hair of a prostitute, which easily could have been seen as a sexual advance. And oh, by the way, notice there are two prostitutes in Jesus' bloodline. Who are they? Rahab and Tamar. Do you think Matthew and Luke, when they were doing the genealogy, said, you know what, I really think we ought to spice up the Messiah's bloodline a little bit. Let's put a couple of prostitutes in there. Rahab, Tamar. No. In fact, there's a lot of embarrassing people in the bloodline. Judah, from where we get the term Jew, not a good guy. Read about him in Genesis. Also, David. David, a man after God's own heart. Yeah, but he's a liar, adulterer, and a murderer. Gee, I guess there's hope for the rest of us. Bathsheba's in there. Do you know that Matthew, when he gets to her in the genealogy, won't mention her name? You know what he says instead? Uriah's wife. Ooh, that's a slam, right? Who was Uriah? Husband of Bathsheba, whom David had killed so he could have Bathsheba. He's telling the truth, but it's a slam. This is embarrassing. You wouldn't find this in the Pharaoh's bloodline. The Pharaoh would never let his historian say that he was the product of a prostitute, would he? No. But the Jewish Messiah is. He's just telling the truth. There's more embarrassing details in the book, but we got to do one more, and that is excruciating deaths. And this is the argument that says that these men who were in a position to know whether Jesus had risen from the dead or not died brutal deaths when they could have saved themselves by simply saying it never happened. Now, it's important to keep in mind that all the writers of the New Testament, with the exception of Luke, were all Jewish believers in Yahweh. They thought they were God's chosen people. They had no motive to invent this. In fact, what did the New Testament writers have to gain by making up a new religion? What did they get by saying Jesus had resurrected from the dead? They got kicked out of the synagogue, and then they got beaten, tortured, and killed. Last time I checked, that was not a list of perks. We're going to start a new religion. We are? Yeah. What's it going to get us? So first we get kicked out of the synagogue, then beaten, tortured, and killed. Well, sign me up. You know, what a great idea. No, I don't think so. In fact, they had every motive to say the resurrection did not happen, not every motive to say it did. Sometimes I get this question. Are there any non-Christian writers that talk about Jesus and the apostles? I mentioned them briefly a few minutes ago. There are. But you know what is often underneath that question? An illicit assumption. What's the illicit assumption? You really can't trust the New Testament writers because they were religious people, and we know religious people embellish things. You can only trust the secular writers. If you think about that for more than 10 seconds, you realize how stupid that is. Why? What did these people have to gain by saying it was true? Nothing. They had everything to lose by saying it was true. My friend J. Warner Wallace is the cold case homicide detective you may have seen on Dateline. He's been on Dateline more than any other cold case detective because he solves murders that are decades old. And Jim says that whenever he finds a dead body that he knows has been murdered, he says there's only 3 reasons why that guy's dead. Not 100 reasons, just 3, or a combination of these 3. There was either a sex issue, a money issue, or a power issue. Sex, money, or power. Those are the 3 things that cause people to commit crimes. And they're the 3 things that cause many of us to do evil as well. They're all good things, sex, money, and power, but they're so good we'll take shortcuts to get them. So if you're going to say that the New Testament is some sort of conspiracy, you've got to find one or more of those 3 motivators to make that plausible. Question: did the New Testament writers get real popular with the ladies by saying Jesus had resurrected from the dead? Did they get money? No, they weren't 21st century prosperity gospel preachers. Did they get power? No. Paul had power as a persecutor of Christianity, and then he became the persecuted once he became a Christian. They didn't get any of that. No, they had everything to lose, and they did lose everything temporarily by saying it was true. They never would have invented this. And then why would they die for a known lie? They wouldn't. You say, wait a minute, Frank, if you're going to say martyrdom proves Christianity, don't you have to say martyrdom proves Islam? No. Why? There's a lot of differences between the Muslim martyrs of today and the New Testament martyrs of New Testament times, but let me just give you one major difference for our purposes here. The Muslim martyrs of today haven't witnessed anything that tells them that Islam is true. They just have faith. The New Testament martyrs, on the other hand, were eyewitnesses. They saw Jesus. They touched Jesus. They ate with Jesus. They verified with their own senses that Jesus had risen from the dead. Many people will die for a lie they think is the truth. Nobody will die for a lie they know is a lie. And the New Testament martyrs were in a position to know whether it was a lie or not, and they went to their deaths anyway. Now, what I'm about to say, to those of you that believe the Bible's inerrant like I do, is going to sound like heresy, but it's not. Stick with me. Christianity is not true because a series of documents we put under one binding we call the Bible says it's true. In fact, Christianity would be true if the Bible never existed. You say, how can that be? Do you realize there were thousands of Christians before a line of the New Testament was ever written? How? How could that be? Question. Was Paul a Christian when he wrote the book of Romans? Of course he was. Why? Because the risen Jesus appeared to him. Was John a Christian when he wrote the Gospel of John? Of course he was. Because Jesus appeared to him. Was Matthew a Christian before he wrote the Gospel? Of course he was. Why? Because he witnessed something. They were Christians and then they wrote it down, not the other way around. Because you see, Christianity did not originate with a book. Christianity originated with an event. If they never wrote it down, it would still be true, although we wouldn't know much about it. In fact, you could say it this way. The New Testament writers did not create the resurrection. The resurrection created the New Testament writers. You wouldn't have Jews in the first century who thought they were God's chosen people and didn't think a man could be God. That was blasphemy. And didn't believe in a resurrection in the middle of the time, only at the end of time. You would never have them invent this and then go die for it. What they're writing down is what they saw, and that's why you can trust it. There's no motive to invent it, every motive not to say it was true, but they said it anyway. Now, there's a lot more evidence that we don't have time to cover, but let's cover the whole thing again real quick. Does truth exist? If someone says there's no truth, you're going to say, is that true? Does God exist? First argument we went through, cosmological. I know it was like 4 hours ago, right? Cosmological. Second argument, teleological. Third, moral. From those 3 arguments, we get a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, intelligent cause that created and sustains all things and is also moral. Are miracles possible? What's the greatest miracle in the Bible? The very first verse, and even atheists are admitting the data for that. They don't think it's God, but what else could it be? And did Jesus rise from the dead? We just saw 2 of 8 lines of evidence that he did. So if you want to go further, the books and DVDs are available out the back door. Text the word evidence again to 44222, and we'll send you this PowerPoint presentation. We're now teaching online courses. I teach some, others teach them, where we go live on Zoom, so we can do Q&A together. Check out our website for those. We're on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. In fact, this thing is being actually streamed on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram right now. So check out our YouTube channel. There's over 1,000 short videos from the college campus that you can check out. In fact, by the way, we're so into YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, we've actually combined these three into one social media platform. We call it 𝗦𝗢𝗕𝗠𝗡. Okay, it's kind of a Jersey thing. You may want to sign up for 𝗦𝗢𝗕𝗠𝗡. Don't forget about the podcast. It's called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. DirecTV and Roku on Wednesday nights. And then finally, if you don't do anything else, download the Cross-Examined app. 2 words in the App Store. Cross-Examined. It's got the podcast on it, the TV show. It's got a quick answer section, and it's free. All right? Before we get to your questions, final 2 minutes. It's true, but so what if it's true? What does it mean? Well, you know what this means? It means that somebody actually did die for you. That's what it means. Now, when I was in the Navy, I was in naval aviation, we had to earn golden wings, which were fairly hard to earn. But there's nothing more difficult in the United States Navy to earn than a golden trident. That's what the SEALs earn. Very few people that start SEAL training make it through. Those that do wear that trident with pride. It is their military identity. When Michael Monsoor was buried in Rosecrans Cemetery in San Diego, California, just about every SEAL on the West Coast showed up for his funeral. And when they passed his casket, they took off their tridents and they pressed them into his casket. They took their identity and put their identity in their Savior, the one that died for them. That's what we're supposed to do. But no, our culture says put your identity in your ethnic group, or put your identity in your race. There's only one race, the human race. Or put your identity in your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your sexual identity or your vocation or your bank account. No, none of those things are ultimate, ladies and gentlemen. I was meant to accept our identity from our Savior. And in Christianity, you don't achieve your identity, you receive your identity. If you have to achieve your identity, you're going to forever be frustrated. Why? Because someone can always do it better than you, and you're never going to know if you measure up enough. An eyewitness of Jesus, who wrote a biography we call the Gospel of John, said, He has given you the right to become a child of God and be adopted into His family, which means you're an heir of the fortune. Why wouldn't you accept that? That's your true identity that can never be taken away. It's nothing you earn. You don't achieve it. You simply receive it. Because He actually died for you, but He didn't just die. He rose again. And by trusting in Him, you can have all your moral transgressions forgiven, and you can be given His righteousness. What could be better than that? You're given His righteousness. There's got to be some questions about this, so if anyone has any questions, this is the great Clint Bolin, ladies and gentlemen. He handles all the video that's being streamed everywhere. Hand for Clint, if you would. And those are the people out there watching. And since no one likes to ask the first question, we're going to move right on to the second question. Second question, just come right down to the mic so people out in YouTube land can hear you. And it can be on anything we've covered here or even stuff we haven't covered. So jump right in right now. After the first person starts, everybody will start coming down. Let me also say that if you want to, we'd really appreciate it if you would actually rate the event here. Stand by going to this, text the word event to 855-909-0582. If you text the word event there, we're just going to ask you like 2 or 3 questions on your cell phone, and that'll help us improve what we're doing here. So if you don't mind doing that. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Hey, Frank.
Hey, what's your name?
My name is Rick.
Hey, Rick, go ahead, sir.
Hey, Frank. I have followed you for a long time, and I really enjoy you. Thank you. But I've got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to get your perspective on something. It appears to me to be an inconsistency, and I know you have probably come across it before, but in Matthew, when the crowd is asking for a sign, and you talked about it earlier, Jesus says there'll be no sign except the sign of Jonah. The Son of Man will be in the belly of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. Okay. Well, in other places he says the Son of Man will rise on the 3rd day. And if he's crucified on Friday and he rises on Sunday, then that's 2 nights. So how do you explain that, or how do you reconcile that?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a Jewish idiom, because in Judaism, they would consider any part of a day to be a part of a day and a night. So 3 days and 3 nights is just a phrase they would use to represent any part of any of those 3 days. So if he went into the tomb on Friday and came out on Sunday morning, that would still be considered 3 days and 3 nights. It's a Jewish idiom.
Okay. All right. Can I ask another?
Sure. Yeah,
right.
that's it. Now you're done.
Okay.
Go ahead, Rick.
I watch you weekly, okay, and you always have an answer. I knew you'd have an answer for that question. What question have you been asked that you said, hey, I'm going to have to get back to you on that one? I mean, you always seem to
You mean from a student or my wife?
From a student.
Okay.
One that you didn't have an immediate answer for.
Well, there's several things. I don't know if I can think of one off the top of my head, but people always ask, what are the hardest questions to answer? And in reality, you hear the same questions over and over again because we're all similar people and we have the same questions we want answers to. The hardest thing is not necessarily answering questions, it's answering questions in 2 minutes. Because you can't cover the waterfront. I mean, if you came up here and said, why does God allow certain evils? Right? Or what good is evil? What are the good things evil does? We could talk about that for hours. And so I can't give a complete answer. No one can. I like what John Lennox says, the brilliant Oxford professor who happens to be a Christian. When he's answering questions, he says, I don't have a complete answer for you, but I have a doorway to an answer. Right? People write books on this stuff. If you go through all of the scriptures, you could spend hours and hours on the question of evil. And so for somebody to, in 2 minutes, cover that, it's impossible. So I think that's the hardest thing about answering questions, is you can only give a real brief answer, a doorway to an answer, not a complete answer, especially on big issues like evil, right? Those are the really hard ones. All right?
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Appreciate it. All right, anyone else? By the way, you don't have to wait till somebody sits down. You can just stand up behind them if you want. Yes, sir. What's your name?
My name's Curtis.
Hey, Curtis. Go ahead, sir.
The canon as we know it today consists of 66 books. Over time, that's changed, evolved. Books have been added, taken back out, added, taken back out. Revelations was come and gone a lot. My question is, I mean, there's some Bibles that have the Apocrypha in it today still. So my question, I guess, would be, is it worth exploring other books, or is that something that should be avoided?
Okay, let's talk about the canon for a second, because what book should be in the Bible is an important question. And here's an example. You get the question a lot, right? So you have a slide for it. People go, is this a staged question? No, these are common questions. So we have slides for it, because I can't even remember all this stuff myself, right? Okay. First of all, what book should be in the Bible? And one point I want to make before we get started, the canon, which means the standard, is not required for proving the resurrection. Okay? You don't need to discover which books were inspired to know whether Jesus rose again. Even if the books weren't inspired, Jesus has risen from the dead based on the evidence. Okay? But anyway, the canon, I like what Bruce Metzger said at Princeton. He said, the canon is a list of authoritative books more than it is an authoritative list of books. What does he mean by that? What he means is the church did not determine the canon. The church discovered the canon. The church didn't determine what books would be in the Bible. The church discovered what books should be in the Bible, which were inspired. And how did they do that? What they did is they tried to figure out, was it written by a prophet of God? Was the writer confirmed by acts of God, i.e. miracles, or someone who was confirmed as an eyewitness? For example, Paul confirmed Luke. Although Luke was not an eyewitness, Paul confirmed him and actually said, or quoted from Luke's gospel, it seems, when he was talking about the Last Supper. Also, was it accepted by the people of God? These are the tests they use. Now, I would quibble a little bit with how you characterize the question about the canon has changed, books were taken out, not taken out. I don't think that's necessarily true. Early on, there were some questions about whether, say, James should have been in there and Revelation should have been in there. But once you got into the 4th century, the 300s AD, when Christianity became tolerable, then you had those councils that got together and discovered what books should have been in the Bible, and there really wasn't a lot of dispute by that point. In fact, even prior to that, by about 108 AD, 25 of the 27 books we call the New Testament had already been quoted by early church fathers as being authoritative. Okay? But here's a few other things to consider. What books should be in the Bible? Gospels and Acts are cited during the lifetimes of the apostles. So we know that they're early. They're quoted as authoritative and unique. They're collected early in one volume called a codex. It looks like a book that we have now. They were publicly read and expounded. Commentaries were written on them. The opponents admitted the Gospels were written by the disciples, and no other Gospels were treated this way. Okay? Now, why does the Catholic Church have a different Old Testament than the Protestant Church? I'll give you the answer as I understand it, and my co-author, Dr. 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, wrote a book called Roman Catholics and Evangelicals, Agreements and Differences. I think it's still an excellent book, even though it's 25 years old. Even Roman Catholics have endorsed the book, and I was brought up Catholic because I'm from New Jersey and it's the law. I went to Catholic high school, okay? But as I see it, it seems to me that the additional books of the Old Testament that were added by the Roman Catholic Church at the Council of Trent beginning in about 1546 were books that the Jews did not consider part of their Old Testament. Why are the Catholics putting it in their Old Testament? It seems to me because they were trying to counter Luther, and Luther wanted to reform the church. He didn't want to break away from the church. He wanted to reform the church, and when he tried to do that, the Roman Catholic Church dug their heels in and said, now we're adding these books, or we're going to say these books have always been a part of the Old Testament because those books, particularly I think it was 2nd Maccabees, affirmed the idea that you could pray for the dead, which is what indulgences was all about, which is really what riled up Luther. That, you're giving money to the church so your mother's soul can pop out of purgatory? Where are you getting that from? 2nd Maccabees. Oh, okay. Well, 2nd Maccabees isn't in the Bible. It is now, right? Now, Roman Catholics may dispute that, but I think that's the best explanation as to why we have different Old Testaments. Now, is it worth reading these works? Sure. In fact, 1st and 2nd Maccabees has some really good historical information in them. I just don't think they're part of the inspired canon. And even if there is a dispute, remember, while it's important, it is the Old Testament. Christians are under the New Covenant, not the Old Covenant.
I 100% agree with everything you said. I just know that there's some of the books, Enoch, for example, which is pretty far-fetched. When you read it, you're like, whoa, how can this be possible? But so I wonder if your opinion might have been, and I agree with you that our Bible now is a God-inspired book. Mm-hmm. But I wondered if maybe you thought maybe some of those more far-fetched or books that create lunacy would be taken out by an individual.
Well, Enoch, I am not an expert on the book of Enoch, but my friend Michael Heiser is. And if you look up Michael Heiser, Heiser, and go to his website, you can read some articles. He thinks Enoch gives us some good information about the Jewish mindset at the time, even though it's not an inspired book. So these are books worth reading. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Anyone else? Yes, sir. What's your name?
I'm Jason.
Go ahead, Jason. How are you?
May you sign this book for my mom?
Yes, of course I will. Do you want me to sign it now or later?
It doesn't matter.
Let me do it later, if that's
okay.
all right. Thank you, Jason. Actually, Clint has better penmanship. He can sign it. All right? No. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Gary's his name. There's always a controversy between New World and Old World.
Uh-huh.
I don't understand why I'm kind of an Old World or Old Because you look at the stars, you can see that sometimes it takes millions of years for the light to get to us. And the Word says, in the beginning, God created the heavens, which is both heaven and the universe, and the earth. And then it starts on the 6 days. And in the last day, it says God rested on the 7th day. I would consider that we're still in the 7th day.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. When people ask me how old is the universe, I say I'm absolutely convinced that it's at least 59 years old. Okay. All right, I'll throw my mom in there. It's at least 83.
I'm 70.
All right, well, it's at least 70, okay? When God created is not the issue. That he created is. And it depends on what is meant by Genesis 1. I personally think that Genesis 1 is the creation story is a polemic against the Egyptian creation story. Because in the Egyptian creation story, they have these gods who are inside the universe. They're unexplained as to how they got there, whether they were uncreated, whether they were self-created, which of course we know is impossible, or they've always existed. And they bring order to chaos. Yahweh's story is, no. God doesn't have to fight anybody to bring order to chaos. God's outside the universe. He creates everything, and he brings order to chaos. Because look, Genesis 1 is written to people who just came out of Egypt. They've been there for 400 years. They're walking through the desert, right? They're not asking the question, I wonder how old this place is. That's not their question. They want to know, is Yahweh the true God, or are the Egyptian gods the true God? And it seems to me that that's what that creation story is about. And as you know, there's poetic elements to it. You've got first 3 days that are creating. The next 3 days are filling. Day 1 and day 4 are congruent. Day 2 and day 5. Day 3 and day 6. And as you just mentioned, day 7 seems to be when God rests. And we're still in day 7 now, according to this account. He's still resting. In fact, the word yom in Hebrew can mean 24 hours. It can mean 12 hours. He called the light day, the darkness night. It could mean an indefinite period of time. Like if I were to say that Peyton Manning was a good quarterback in his day, you wouldn't think he was good for just 24 hours, right? Or it could mean an unending period of time. And so the word day means several different things. And in Genesis 2:4, which is kind of a summary statement of the creation in Genesis 1, it says, in the day the Lord created, and that word day, yom, is referring to all 6 creation days. So you're making assumptions no matter which way you go. If you're trying to judge that it's old or young, you're making assumptions you can't prove.
A lot of the church goes back to some guy in Ireland, okay, that came out with 6,000 years.
You're talking about the Schofield Reference Bible, yes.
Well,
yes.
I don't think it was him. I think it was some...
Or Bishop Usher.
Bishop Usher.
Okay, yeah.
And that's what people go by. I don't understand. That's not a biblical...
Well, it's some guy's opinion.
Some guy's opinion.
Yeah.
That's what most of the church goes by.
Well, it might be. Look, the earth could be old, it could be young. I think the better evidence is it's old, and it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, because when you get to heaven, God isn't going to say, did you think it was old or young? No, he's not going to. He's going to say, what'd you do with Jesus? So I agree with you.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, sir. What's your name?
My name is Maurice.
Hey, Maurice, the Raiders are 3-0, aren't they?
Yeah, I don't even know, man.
You don't even know you're wearing a Raiders hat.
Hey, this is for fashion, baby. I'm just throwing this on.
Oh, this is fashion, baby. I like it.
Yeah, I'm just being real with you. That's how I keep it funky all the time.
All right,
but no, I'm curious. So in our cultural landscape, we tend to see a lot of adjusting and movements, especially when you think about people purportedly leaving the faith. So it's 2 common notions. The first is decolonization of your faith, right? Meaning recognizing that global colonial expansion actually suppress the dignity and whatnot of other people groups. But on the other side, the desire to decolonize your faith seems to want to get back to something that's a little more purer than its contemporary expression. That's the first. But then the second would be the idea of deconstructing your faith, right? So if your faith is constructed on the basis of a colonial ideology or framework, many people are supposedly leaving the faith that they claim they once held for the sake of decolonizing or deconstruction. So I'd be curious as to your thoughts on that.
It seems to
the
me
concept of
that
deconstruction.
people are trying to arrive at their faith because they believe that the faith had some sort of immoral aspect to it, or it was used for immoral ends.
Sure.
Well, that's true, actually, that Christians did use their faith for immoral ends. Some Christians bought into slavery. Some Christians bought into segregation. Some Christians bought into the Crusades. Some Christians bought into the Spanish Inquisition. But you don't judge a religion or a philosophy by its heretics. You judge a religion or philosophy by whether or not it's true.
Sure.
And so I think what we need to do is look at the evidence and see whether or not it is true that God exists and Jesus rose from the dead. And if he has, then he's God. All we need to do then is to try and discover what Jesus said and try and order our lives according to it. Whether or not people have used it for immoral ends is another question. We got to be concerned with whether or not it's true.
Sure. And a follow-up, excuse me, I'm curious as to how you would counsel people who are currently in that stage of, hey, I've recognized some of the discrepancies and historical brokenness or unethical acts Christians have perpetuated, yet I want to maintain my faith in Jesus, but I cannot abide the things that have happened. So one thing that I've always said is, again, I'm not out to defend Christians. More so I want to defend the faith.
Yes.
Rather, I think we have to contend or at least address some of the ethical challenges that Christianity or people who claim to be Christians have purported, especially when you think about matters of justice and whatnot.
Exactly. But it seems to me that the only worldview that is going to solve injustice is the Christian worldview, because we all believe that we're all one in Christ and that there's no such thing as a caste system. There's no such thing as racism. There's no such thing as any of these negative things that have been done in the past, illicit use of violence, right? These are all things that Christians have done illegitimately by not following Christianity. And it seems to me, Maurice, what some people don't recognize is that if they're going to leave Christianity for some other worldview, if they're going to deconstruct their faith here, they're going to reconstruct some other faith over here, and the people that adhere to that have also done evil, because we've all done evil.
Amen.
Right? We're all evil. That's why we need a Savior. None of us have been pure in history. So thank God there's Jesus, because without him, none of us are making it.
Right. I just figured I'd throw a little lob up there.
Thanks, brother. God bless you. Nice hat.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. What's your name?
Hi, Alina.
Alina. Go ahead, Alina.
So I've heard two arguments over the years, the first of which is you cannot lose your salvation, or the once saved, always saved.
Yes.
And the second one is salvation is something that must be maintained, or you can lose your salvation.
Do you mind taking the mask down just for this?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we can hear better. Start over again if you don't mind.
So
Go ahead.
I've heard two arguments over the years, the first of which is you cannot lose your salvation, or the once saved, always saved. And the second one is salvation is something that must be maintained, or something you can lose.
Right.
An argument I've heard for the first one is there's a verse that says, no one can take you from the palm of my hand. And one of the many arguments I've heard for the second one is the parable of the talents. So my question is, what do you believe, and what is your greatest defeating argument?
I think the parable of the talents is talking about it's talking about judgment based on the gifts that God has given you. I don't think it's talking about whether or not someone's saved.
Because in the end, it says that they go to the person who gave them the talents in the end, and he says, depart from me, I never knew thee.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying, that aspect of it. I'd have to go back. That's Luke 12?
I don't.
All right.
Not off the top.
I'd have to go back and look at that. That is interesting, though, but at the end, what Jesus does in the judgment is he takes a talent from the guy who did nothing with it, and he gives it to the guy who did more with it and actually doubled his talent. And so he takes from the least and gives to the guy who had more. This is the opposite of what's called equity. This is called justice, right? He's giving it to the one who worked because this guy didn't work. So it has to do with justice and judgment. But I don't know if the parable of the talents has much to do with whether or not you're saved. I personally think once saved, always saved, but I realize Christians disagree with that. And one of the reasons I think once saved, always saved is when Jesus says in John 5:24, he says, he who believes is passed from death into life. In other words, you get eternal life when you believe. You don't get eternal life when you die. If you get eternal life when you believe, and it's eternal, by definition, you can't lose it. Okay. Now, what you can do is you can lose your sanctification. Because, see, there's two aspects to this. There's justification, which happens immediately as soon as you believe. And then there's sanctification, which is an ongoing process where hopefully you're becoming more like Jesus. This sanctification thing can go up and down. But once you're justified, you're justified. And what you don't gain by moral effort, you can't lose by moral ineptitude.
Can I ask another question?
Go ahead, yeah.
I do know also in other places in the New Testament, it lists several sins, and it'll be like adulterers, fornicators, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
They do not enter into the kingdom of heaven. So I realize we all sin.
Yeah.
We all sin daily.
Right.
But if a person accepts Jesus as their Lord and Savior, but they go back to those ways, those sinning ways, and they become an active person in that sin, what
Okay, well, you're talking about 1 Corinthians 6 and also 1 Corinthians 5. 1 Corinthians 6, Paul lists all the things that separate us from God, and this is one of the clobber verses that people who believe that same-sex behavior is okay will point to and say, oh, that's a clobber verse. And it's basically saying homosexuals and others will not inherit the kingdom of God. But what people don't read about that is every one of us is in that list. It's not just homosexuals, it's covetous, it says. Everyone in this room is covetous. What Paul is laying out is he's laying out all these sins are going to keep you out of the kingdom. But then after that he says, but that is what some of you were. But you've been washed, you've been sanctified. All of us are on our way to hell unless we're sanctified, regardless of our sexual behavior. Because we've committed at least one of those sins, probably a lot more of those sins in that list he mentions there. So he is saying that same-sex behavior and covetousness and adultery and all these other things he lists, stealing, theft, all those things, they're all wrong. But all of us have done at least one of those things and maybe are doing them now. Now, regarding the second part of your question where you're saying, what if somebody claims to be a Christian but then slides back into sin and thinks the sin is okay? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, and they become an active person.
Okay, well, this is going to sound harsh, but this is Paul in 1 Corinthians 5. He says, expel the immoral brother. Hand him over to Satan so that Satan may teach him a lesson. That's what he says in 1 Corinthians 5. Then if you read 2 Corinthians, if you're reading between the lines, it seems that the guy that he sent out of the congregation in 1 Corinthians has come to his senses and is now back in the congregation. What was that guy doing? He was sleeping with his father's wife, and he thought it was okay. And Paul says, kick the guy out. Do you realize that everybody is welcome in the church? The only person not welcome in a church is someone who claims to be a Christian and denies known sin is sin. That person, Paul says, kick out because a little bit of leaven can get into the entire loaf. And he's kicking the guy out not only to protect the congregation, but to hopefully bring the guy to his senses.
So is that person saved, or is it just his own opinion? So is salvation based off of what you think you are? Because
I can't judge whether the person's saved, but I would be very, very concerned about that person. You might also go to 1 John 3, which talks about staying in known sin.
Okay.
It's not where any of us want to be. Do we all sin? Yeah, we all do. But if we're now advocating sin, we might not be saved to begin with.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yes, sir.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. What's your name?
My name is Gabe.
Hey, Gabe.
So there's this theory of existence that's been somewhat popularized by figures like Elon Musk and Joe Rogan, this idea or theory called simulation theory. And the idea is that all of our existence, or our existence, is like a simulation or something run by higher beings.
Right.
Something like that. I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
Well, if my mind is being run by a higher being, it wouldn't matter. Right?
There would ultimately have to be a God at a point. But I guess the point of that theory is to draw away from that, and I guess it's somewhat of an excuse to draw attention away from
Yeah, it
God.
can be, Gabe. Basically what they're saying is we're living in the Matrix.
Yes.
Right? And, well, there's no way of disproving that. It could be that we're in the Matrix and that this alien being has played with our minds to make us think that we have memories that aren't really true. I mean, is that possible? Yeah, it's possible. I just think it's silly. Right? There's no way of disproving it. There's no way to disprove you're in the Matrix without getting outside the Matrix. It's just like there's no way to know you're having a dream until you do what? Until you wake up. Yep. You got to get outside the illusion to know it's just an illusion. So Elon Musk and others may say that, but what evidence do they have for it?
There is no evidence.
Okay, it's just a speculation. So you don't have to refute something that has no evidence behind it. You just need to say, what evidence do you have for it? See, when someone says something, it's not your job to refute what they say, it's their job to support what they say. So if someone says we're just in this big simulation, what evidence do you have for that? Excuse me. And see what they say. How did you come to that conclusion? Why do you think that's true? It's just a fairy tale, which could be true, but there's no way of knowing whether it's true or not.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. What's your name?
How's it going? I'm Steven.
Hey, Steven. Go ahead.
For one, thank you for being here. Thank all these youth for being here. I don't know if y'all doing this for a grade or if you're just good Christians, but hey, I'm happy to see y'all here, man. But
go ahead, sir.
I was just wondering if you believe we are saved by faith or saved by works, or if it's both. Who's more saved? Is it a man that has God in his heart and accepts Jesus, but then lives sinfully and does no good works? Or is it someone that maybe does a bunch of good works as a smokescreen for all the evil they're trying to cover up, have no belief in Jesus, but they do a bunch of good works?
Yeah, I think it's neither. I think we're saved by grace through faith to do good works, as Paul says in Ephesians chapter 2, that we're prepared to do good works. Martin Luther said something about this where he said that we're saved by faith alone, but our faith is not alone. In other words, when we accept the free gift of salvation out of gratitude for what Christ has done for us, we should therefore live a life of good works. But the works don't save us. The works are the fruit. They're not the root of our salvation. The root of our salvation is grace acquired through faith, but the fruit of our salvation are good works that God prepared us in advance to do, Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10.
Amen. You can't see the light, but you can see what the light shines on.
Yes, sir.
Amen.
Thank you, Stephen. Oh, what, you guys can't stay for 4 hours? What's wrong with you? I mean, come on. Thanks for coming. Yes, sir.
What's up, Frank? My name is Jack.
Hey, Jack.
My question revolves around free will.
Yes.
And I just wanted to hear your take on free will. So
Okay.
if God is in control of everything, so I'm sure it was his plan when he sent Christ to earth to die for us, he knew that was going to happen. And if he's in control, and if he controls everything, and if it was his will for him to send Christ to die for us, Judas betrayed Jesus, and in order for that to happen, Judas would have had to. Do you believe that Judas made the choice to betray Jesus, or is it God that made it happen, and is there free will?
Yes, it's both. When God elects to create this universe, he knows how it's going to turn out. He knows that Judas is going to betray him. But that doesn't mean he's causing Judas to betray him. He knows he will, but he's not causing it. An illustration, a new mother puts her baby down at night, and she knows at some point during the night that baby's going to wake up and want to eat. She knows that. But because she knows that, is she causing the baby to wake up?
No.
No. Knowledge does not necessarily imply causation. Since God is all-knowing, no matter what we do, he's going to know we're going to do it, but that doesn't mean he's directly causing us to do it. He's not taking our free will away. He's observing what we're doing, and he, in effect, brought it into existence because when he elected to create this universe, he elected the outcome because he's all-knowing, and when he creates the universe, he knows how it's going to turn out. But that doesn't mean he's taking away our free will. This is why my co-author, Dr. 𝗦𝗨𝗣𝗍𝗔𝗫, wrote a book years ago called Chosen but Free. We're still chosen, but we're also free.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. All righty. Anyone else? Is that it, ladies and gentlemen? All right, couple things I just want to mention. First of all, thanks for coming out tonight. Thanks for the people watching out there on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram. A friend of mine has written a new book that you'll want to get. I'm not talking about my books out there, but J. Warner Wallace, the cold case homicide detective, just wrote a book called Person of Interest. Trust me, you want to get this book. It's got over 400 drawings in it that augment what he's trying to tell you. And when you see the kind of impact Jesus of Nazareth has had on culture, you're going to be blown away. It's an amazing book, Person of Interest. For those of you watching out there, we'll be at Marshall University next Monday night, so hope to see you there. And if you want to tell anybody about it, tell them about it. This is also going to be up on YouTube probably in about 10 minutes once this stream stops. So if you want to go back and see any of the points again or any of the Q&A again, you can. All right, folks, thanks so much. Thanks for being here. God bless.